Good afternoon. You join us at the end of Thursday's session on week 3, I believe, at the University of Bristol studying veterinary science. Now, today was a day for course-based learning, so we received our new course-based learning project, or case I should say, that was regarding a puppies and kittens case. So, quick outline, it was essentially it was a scenario essentially of a lady calling up a vet saying that they moved to a new place. There are wild cats essentially already there, but they were at the same time they were also thinking about getting a puppy, and they were a complete novice and essentially wanted to know the hows and everything and the whys and the whats of everything associated with cats and dogs. Essentially, that's essentially what we set out to find out, ask these questions and find out things about the case that we didn't know or was unfamiliar with the group, some stuff to do with feline leukemia, and yeah, so we essentially worked through the case a little bit. We had a facilitator talking us through the case, guiding us along a bit, because it was a bit different from the previous one, because the previous one was essentially we got given some ILOs, we got given our ILOs from the start, and then as a group we essentially, our plan anyway was to just essentially divide the ILOs amongst us, and then we'd work together towards a summary document, a presentation and a multiple choice questionnaire. Now with this one it's slightly different. So we essentially get given a case for the first bit over an hour or so. For the first large portion of it, we essentially assign roles. We sort of figure out what it is. We essentially have to try and use the first bit to figure out what the ILOs are, and then at the end of the session we get given the ILOs, and then we sort of go from there. So it's a bit of a weird one. You basically start the session off by reviewing the case material and the background and filling any bits of knowledge that are missing from the group, and then you work towards you're supposed to try and work your way towards what you think the ILOs will be, and then at the end of the session you get given your ILOs, and then you sort of have to try and you then get given the ILOs, you look at the ILOs, and then you'll essentially get, what we done, obviously we divide the ILOs for different people to research. You'd then sort of go off and research that, but you'd also cross that with the case. So you cross off any material and relate that to that, just so that everything you did in the case wasn't completely pointless. And then you sort of work through it, and then you get given more case material as these sessions go forth, as the week progresses. And then at the end, in the sort of middle of next week, once the case is all done and dusted, we then essentially get talked to a specialist who will give us essentially all the answers, and then we sort of cross that with what we'd done, and we'd fact check and so forth. But I think it's essentially an opportunity. This whole CBL stuff is an opportunity for us to probe our minds and put ourselves in a setting of working through problems. Because it would more or less be individual when you'd be doing it in the real world, more or less. But then sometimes you would have to end up working with other vets to try and solve a problem. Because with this case, for instance, a single vet could likely do this themselves. A single vet would be able to do this themselves, but I think as we go on, there are going to be more complex cases where it might actually require a lot of this external what would you call it? Fact checking. Yes, external fact checking and talking with other people and talking with other peers, other vets, other professions into the scenarios. So, but it tries to get you to think about questions and put you in these scenarios to try and work through problems. which is okay, I guess. I think the group work is nice, but it's also like with these ILOs, there's essentially nothing to submit, really. It's just because the thing is with this stuff is like there's nothing to submit. So we go off and do all this research, and then it's more or less for our own efficacy if we actually take any of that on board. But yeah, so we did that. That was only a few hours, and then this morning we had a practical, which essentially at the moment we're going through our OSCEs, our animal handling OSCEs. So in several weeks' time, prior to Christmas, we'll be doing our animal handling examinations, in which we need to go through a step-by-step process of handling a dog, handling a cat, handling cattle, handling horses, handling sheep. And I think there's maybe one more, but we essentially we'll essentially get examined on our handling with them, and there's a few areas for that. So there's the handling aspect, and then there's you have to also identify sites for intramuscular, intravenous injections. Essentially, you have to like identify these points, and then I think there's some other things associated with them, but yeah, that's essentially something you have to pass. But ours today was quite an overview one. It was quite a blanket one, because we each get split into groups, and then we essentially go through a rotation. So, you know, this week someone will be doing dogs, this group's going to be doing horses, yada yada yada. But our workstation that our group had to do was animal management, but it was essentially a blanket. There was we went to a room in which there were like loads of different stations of practical stuff that you will be doing with all the different species. So with cows, with dogs, with sheep and so forth. And essentially it was just, you know, full of models, full of work booklets, full of like little things you can just play yourself with and look at. But it was just more or less go around and do it yourself, have a play, read these documents, work with the models and so forth. So yeah, that wasn't particularly brilliant, but you know, some interesting stuff, I suppose. So I just don't feel that a bit weird working on models, just like working with essentially a teddy of a dog and practicing these things. It's going to be very different when it's in a real life situation with an actual dog or a cow or so forth. But anyway, yeah, but okay sort of day. Now yesterday wasn't attended just because there was an optional session for a Navli lecture. Yeah, there's an optional session for the Navli, which is the American, essentially the American test for when you want to become a vet. You have to essentially do the Navli in order to go to America to work and practice as a vet. Essentially talking through that process. We had to look at it in our own time, because I don't think it was worth attending, but I still had to look at it online, and some interesting stuff there. But again, it's interesting to find out now, but obviously it's not something that I'm going to be intentionally wanting to do anytime soon, because to do the Navli costs £2,000, which is lovely. And they said to focus on booking it now, but focus on looking at it and practicing for it now, practicing for the Navli, which is a whole ordeal and spiel. But again, it's still a massive uncertainty as to if that's actually what I'm going to want to do. But anyway, and then there was presentations for the CBL, and I wasn't a part of the presentation, so I didn't participate. Instead, we caught up with some work that was outstanding, so that was okay. So that was yesterday, that was today, and tomorrow I believe the only thing on the agenda is a practical. Yeah, the only thing that's scheduled for synchronous work is a practical in the labs, doing some anatomy. So, bones, anatomical terminology, and imaging, essentially. So we're to be put in a practical room, a lab room, with 5 stations. You get split into 5 groups. You work on the stations. 2 stations, well, one's for ultrasound imaging, one's for radiograph imaging. Another is for horse, I believe, topographical information. So where's the cannon bone, where's the stifle, where's the shoulder, and all this stuff. And we've got all the notes in the book, so we have the cheat sheet for it, more or less. Because, yeah, I've essentially looked it all up and more or less done it all, but we've got to go in and practically do it. And then there's, so those 3, and then it's a mobility one. So you're talking about supination, pronation, flexion, extension, rotation, circumnuction, and a bunch of others. Just talking a lot about like the different types of movement and flexes that body parts can do. And then the last one is positions, so your palmar, plantar, dorsal, cranial, rostral, ventral, and all that stuff. So identifying all those in relation, but using models as well. I don't know if these are going to be Teddy models. I hope they're not. I hope there's some, because it's in a lab. It's in an actual, I believe it's in an actual like dissection room lab. So I don't know if it's going to be on actual specimens, like actual. There's going to be some actual models, essentially, of real life stuff. The skeleton will be, but I don't know if that's going to be like, if we're going to get like some either models or actual like cadavers of a sorts of, say, an arm, in which like there'll be a demonstration on like the flexion or something. That would seem a bit excessive, just to illustrate that, but yeah, that's the plan for tomorrow. So I'm going to be going in and doing that practical, but at the same time we'll also do some catch up, because I do have some CBL stuff that we've been assigned to essentially do. So yeah, because we do have some, so we're going to be doing the CBL ILOs probably, but I do also have some other things I want to catch up on and read up on. So we'll probably stay in for a few hours and do that, just so that our trip is not completely wasted. And then, yeah, go from there. So that's going to be it for today, and we will catch up tomorrow morning.